If you could, we'll talk to Linda. Linda, how did you arrive to the Bureau?
I was called by someone to tell me that I should not leave my sealed room, that I should not go down to the bomb shelter, but that I should immediately put on my gas mask and get into the room. Shortly after that, I heard a police car come by with a loudspeaker advising the same thing and advising us to listen to the radio. I did just that, and then they moved to the office. Overhead, I've been hearing lots of airplanes flying above, and beyond that, I'm here. We're out here with our gas masks, and we're fine for the moment, and we hope to stay that way. Yes, Reed, first of all, we are told that this was a countrywide alert, and civil defense people are advising Israelis to put on their gas masks very carefully. You may recall that 4 people died as a result of suffocation this morning, so civil defense is telling people to be very careful indeed. As you can see, Deputy Foreign Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is here with us during this raid. Bibi, can you tell us what you needed to learn on the telephone?
Well, we haven't learned much yet. We're trying to find out exactly why this alert was called. It's countrywide, but I don't know whether there have been actual sightings of missiles falling.
You were asked a little earlier, before the air raid started, what you expected Israel's response would be, what your reaction was to the President's comments earlier tonight. Can you repeat them for us now?
I must say that this is the darnest way to conduct an interview, to borrow a phrase. But of course, what it does demonstrate, I think, in a fairly dramatic way, is the kind of threat we're facing. Now, we would like to see that threat removed, and we will take the actions that are necessary to remove it. I cannot tell you when, I cannot tell you where, I cannot tell you how, but we will make sure that Israel is safe.
Again, Reed, as I mentioned earlier, it is quite difficult to speak through these masks. The country has been advised, and we as well, to go into a sealed room, which we have prepared in our office. I think that perhaps it might be a wise idea for us to do that now.
When an Iraqi Scud hit this middle-class neighborhood, the people who lived here were glad they weren't home. This is what's left of the sealed room where they would have been sitting with their gas masks on. Across the street, their neighbor's house was damaged beyond repair.
This was the room that was to be the sealed room. That was a sealed room, and that's the one that was absolutely devastated.
And one family that lived in this building came back from Jerusalem to find their sealed room completely destroyed.
I mean, if we would have been in the house, I don't think we would have possibly come out alive.
Thus the dilemma, where to go when the sirens sound. Civil defense officials say stay inside in sealed rooms, the best defense against a possible chemical attack. But many Israelis are ignoring the rules, heading downstairs to bomb shelters, which they feel offer better protection against missiles armed with conventional explosives. All 33 missiles fired at Israel have been conventional weapons, not chemical.
In the shelter, I feel sure.
The panic and confusion has now produced a slight modification to the standing order. If a person can reach his sealed bomb shelter with a gas mask within 2 minutes after the air raid siren has sounded, civil defense officials say it's now safe to go downstairs. But the Army warns that the biggest threat still remains a chemical attack, and sealed rooms offer the best protection. Furthermore, they're worried about people running out of their apartments to bomb shelters and being caught outside.
While on the way downstairs, they may be caught, and that's the worst thing, and also running out to the public bomb shelter, they may be caught just when the missile is landing somewhere in the neighborhood. And by that, we may have many more casualties.
But this woman felt at greater risk by staying inside. She ran next door to her neighbor's bomb shelter Friday night. When she saw what was left of her home, she realized she'd made the right decision.
Every person should think for himself. And if you have a shelter inside, I'm sure you should go there.
The Army points out that sealed rooms do provide protection, that even after 13 missile attacks, there have been very few Israeli casualties. But that logic seems to be making less of an impression on more and more people heading to their shelters. One woman who saw her house reduced to rubble believes she lost her home, but by avoiding her sealed room, she may have saved her life. Linda Scherzer, CNN, Tel Aviv. This West Bank Palestinian man is recovering from a gunshot wound. He was shot by soldiers from an army undercover unit, allegedly as he painted slogans on a wall. This might have been just another shooting on the West Bank, except that this Israeli couple, who asked to remain anonymous, claimed they witnessed the incident. They say they were shocked by how fast soldiers pulled the trigger.
What mostly disturbed me is that the soldiers didn't shoot in the air and immediately shot at them.
Authorities say soldiers strictly followed Army firing regulations, but the Army admits that in the war against armed Arab activists, firing orders have been redefined. Increasingly, undercover units disguised as Arabs have been raiding Palestinian villages. These units have killed more than 20 men on the Army's wanted list this year. But General Danny Yatom strongly denies they have orders to shoot to kill.
It is the last resort. And it is only after a warning call. And the warning call comes so that he will be able, if he wants, to stop and to give himself.
When soldiers do shoot, says Yatom, the order is first to injure, not kill. But with the increased use of firearms by Palestinians, both sides admit the stakes are higher now. As one Army colonel put it, any Palestinian carrying a weapon has to know there is a chance he may die. In their search for armed activists, the Army sometimes terrorizes whole communities. CNN recorded one such incident in a remote village where Palestinians were preparing to observe a memorial service. For 7 minutes, soldiers came in, firing in the air, frightening children, pushing and shoving women. Much of the material you're watching was censored, and CNN's crew was detained for 5 hours.
We don't take anything out of here. You've got no right to take anything.
Human rights groups say soldiers often shoot when their lives aren't being threatened.
In many cases, soldiers face danger and have to defend themselves, and it's all right. They have to do it. But we found that in many other cases, the shooting is unjustified and not necessary, and we think that the person could have been caught without being killed.
Other tactics include harassing and pressuring families. This mother says her son, a wanted activist, has been on the run for 12 months.
The army comes and threatens, either you give us Mahmoud or we'll kill him. We are going to finish him up.
Many of those the army is looking for are members of extremist groups, in all responsible for killing hundreds of their own people and shooting Israeli soldiers and civilians. The army has captured hundreds of wanted activists alive. But recent killings are worrying Palestinians. 6 Arab activists killed by undercover units this year were buried in this cemetery in the village of Jenin. A grave is already prepared for the next funeral. Linda Scherzer, CNN, the West Bank. Backstage opening night. After barely 2 months of practice, Israel's newest orchestra, Israel's newest citizens, are preparing to make their debut.
Cultural life here is already exploding, and this will really, enrich it even more.
It is the first wave of a cultural revolution. Hundreds of classical musicians from some of the finest orchestras in the Soviet Union have immigrated to Israel, bringing a heritage of music with them. Maestro Georgi Gatsaridze brought them together. Like most of the musicians, he left his position as conductor of the Odessa Philharmonic because of rising anti-Semitism. Though his fledgling orchestra has no funding yet, he believes its music will make a big impact.
Because they all carry with them the great culture with which they came.
Israeli conductors, too, see the Soviets raising the level of the orchestras and ensembles. But can a country the size of Israel absorb all this talent? Without financial support for new orchestras, many Israelis wonder whether the future of these musicians lies in Israel. It does for violinist Michael Yanovsky. He and 2 other Soviets won coveted seats with the Haifa Symphony. But unless the orchestra expands or the government funds new ones, only the best artists will qualify.
They
want to help us wholeheartedly, but they don't always have that possibility because Israel is a small country.
Already, orchestras around the world are placing ads in Israeli newspapers, trying to lure musicians out of Israel. And unlike other Soviet professionals working odd jobs to make money, These professionals say they need their music.
It's almost like a religion. It's very difficult to ask a musician to change his profession.
Israeli officials don't plan to. They hope eventually to offer the Soviets jobs as music teachers and cultural advisors, and to subsidize new performing groups.
The criteria is not how big the land is, but how big the heart is. And Israel has a big heart to absorb all these cultural contributions, all these musicians and artists.
For now, they plan to stay in Israel to enrich the arts, to build new lives.
It's a ray of hope in a time of great turmoil.
And for a country already brimming with talent, a chance to really shine. Linda Scherzer, CNN, Tel Aviv. This bulldozer has become the symbolic weapon of Jewish settlers bent on holding on to disputed land. This mountain on the West Bank is where they plan to build 400 new housing units to strengthen Israel's grip on the occupied territories.
This is my home. We're going to stay here forever, no question about it.
There is dispute among settlers and Israeli peace activists over whether this is, in fact, a new settlement or an expansion of an existing one called Talmon. New or improved, the fact remains that 400 new homes, accompanied by schools, stores, and civil services, are being built at a time when Palestinians are demanding a freeze on Jewish settlements as a precondition to peace talks.
Settlement process and peace process cannot go together. One of them should stop.
With Arabs and Israelis preparing for a second round of bilateral negotiations, Israeli peace activists charge that the timing of this building boom couldn't be worse.
How can someone go towards peace talks and at the same time put a bomb under the table? And this is the bomb here.
CNN asked several Israeli officials to discuss the settlement issue. No one was available. One official, however, says that the government has not approved any new settlements. Even before the next round of bilateral talks, the government appears to be digging in its heels against any territorial compromise. This week, the Israeli parliament passed a resolution that says that the Golan Heights is off limits for negotiations. And by continuing to allow the expansion of settlements in the West Bank, the government may be sending a message that the occupied territories are off limits too. Linda Scherzer, CNN, Jerusalem.